I want to take you into a story that is not just about people, but about timing, about the strange way life rearranges its pieces when we least expect it. The last time I had seen him, he was barely more than a boy. A teenager, awkward in his own skin, restless, distracted. Always either glued to a video game screen or caught in some half-serious argument with his mother. Back then, he was just her son. A background figure in my visits. Someone I barely acknowledged beyond the polite hello or a distracted smile as I passed him in the hallway. To me, he didn't really exist outside of being her child. But that evening, years later, something had shifted. I remember standing at the doorway of my friend's house, balancing a bottle of wine in one hand, my mind already running through the usual chatter I expected. Updates about work, complaints about husbands, maybe gossip about mutual acquaintances. But when the door opened, I saw him. He stood there. Taller now. Broader. His shoulders carried weight that had not been there before, not just in muscle but in presence. His frame filled the doorway in a way that startled me. The boy I remembered was gone. In his place stood someone whose very silence demanded attention. And it wasn't just his face. Yes, it had matured, sharper at the jaw, softened near the eyes. But that wasn't what unsettled me. It was the way he looked at me. Not with the indifferent glaze of a teenager tolerating adults, but with a recognition that made me feel suddenly visible in a way I hadn't in years. His smile came first, subtle, almost private. I returned it without thinking, though my chest tightened in a way I couldn't name. My friend appeared behind him, greeting me in her usual warm, effortless tone. She began chattering immediately about the evening, about the meal she had prepared, about small trivialities of her week. I nodded, answered, laughed at the right moments. But a part of me wasn't there. A part of me was slipping, again and again, toward the figure leaning casually against the kitchen counter. He didn't say much. But silence can sometimes speak louder than words. I noticed things I shouldn't have noticed. The way his forearm muscles shifted when he reached for a glass. The deepness of his voice when he finally spoke. Lower, rougher, carrying a dryness that seemed older than his years. And though he rarely addressed me directly, I felt his gaze often, steady but unintrusive. Not staring, studying. Dinner was familiar. My friend and I fell into our old rhythm, recycling stories from the past, laughing at memories we had told too many times before. She was animated, oblivious. But I was aware of him in every quiet corner of the evening. The air felt heavier, warmer. I caught myself adjusting the neckline of my blouse more than once, suddenly conscious of fabric brushing against my collarbone. At one point, I excused myself. I stood in the bathroom, cool water dripping from my wrists, staring at my own reflection as if I might catch myself in the act of something unspoken. My cheeks were flushed, my pulse a little too fast, and I didn't understand why. When I returned, dessert had just been served. He stood to help clear the plates. Without asking, he reached for mine. His fingers brushed mine, just lightly, just enough to make me lose track of the thought I was about to speak. It wasn't dramatic, it was nothing really. But my body betrayed me. My breath caught. Coffee followed. My friend carried the conversation until it was time for me to. I hugged her, smiled, promised to catch up soon. As I reached for the door, he was suddenly behind me. His hand touched the handle before mine. He opened it, close enough that his voice, when it came, felt like warmth against the side of my neck. "Careful driving," he said. Simple words. Too simple. Yet my heart reacted as though they carried more. I turned slightly, searching his face, expecting playfulness, a smirk, some trace of mockery. But there was none. His face was unreadable, calm, detached even. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Shame you live so close. Makes things more complicated." He stepped back. His eyes shifted away. The door stood open between us. Nothing more said. In my car, I gripped the wheel tighter than usual. My hands trembled slightly. I told myself it was nothing. Just a young man's attempt at cleverness. Just words thrown into the air to test boundaries. But later that night, standing alone in my bathroom, undressing in the quiet, something shifted. I didn't see my reflection the same way. Not critically. Not even curiously. But with a kind of attention I hadn't given myself in years. I traced my fingers along my collarbone the way I thought I had seen his eyes do earlier. I opened the drawer where lace lingered unworn, untouched. White fabric I hadn't thought about in months. I paused. And something stirred inside me. Not memory, not nostalgia. Something closer to anticipation. When I slipped into bed, my husband was already there, half asleep, eyes on his tablet. He looked up, smiled faintly, then returned to his screen. I lay beside him in silence, still half-dressed. He didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed and chose not to ask. That was how we lived lately. Polite silences, gentle avoidance of the questions that mattered. In the dark, I replayed that moment at the door. His voice. His pause. The heat of his words against my skin. I knew I would see him again. And though I refused to say it aloud, even in the privacy of my own mind, part of me wanted that more than I wanted anything else in weeks. I turned onto my side, facing away from the man who had once been my everything. I pressed my thighs together slowly, subtly. It wasn't desire, not fully. It was something rarer, something more dangerous. The aftertaste of being seen. The days that followed should have been ordinary. They should have blended together like they always did. Work, errands, dinners half finished at the table. My husband's quiet presence beside me in the evenings. But nothing was ordinary anymore. Not because anything happened. Nothing had. But because something had been woken up. I felt it in small, almost invisible ways. Folding laundry, I would drift into thought, replaying the way he leaned against the counter. The way his gaze seemed to rest on me without hesitation. Cooking dinner, I would catch myself slicing too slowly, staring into the simmer of a pan as though the steam might form his silhouette. Even brushing my teeth side by side with my husband, I would hear his voice echo again, soft, low, deliberate. Shame you live so close. It haunted me. Not like a nightmare. More like a whisper that stayed in the corners of my mind, waiting for quiet moments to return. I told myself I was being foolish. That it was nothing more than imagination. The brain grasping for novelty in a life that had grown routine. And yet, the thought lingered, stretching itself into places it didn't belong. One evening, while scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone, I stumbled across a photo my friend had posted. A simple picture. Her backyard lit by string lights, a casual family gathering. But in the corner, blurred and half out of frame, there he was. His posture familiar. His shoulders angled just slightly away, as though even the camera couldn't fully capture him. My heart gave a small, traitorous jolt. I zoomed in. My fingers pinched the screen, trying to bring him closer. The image was grainy, indistinct, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that he wasn't just a thought. He was real. Flesh and presence. That night, when my husband reached to kiss my cheek before sleep, I flinched. Not out of rejection, but out of surprise. I had been so far away, so buried in that single blurred image, that I had forgotten where I was. He didn't notice. He simply turned over, exhaled, and drifted into the steady rhythm of his breathing. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake. And I wondered, was this how it began for others? Not with grand betrayals or passionate declarations, but with the smallest of accidents? A glance, a word, a blurred photo on a phone screen that refuses to leave your mind? The following week, my friend invited me over again. I said yes without hesitation. Too quickly, perhaps. But I didn't allow myself to question it. When I arrived, I tried to act natural. I brought a small dessert, hugged her at the door, made the same light jokes I always did. But my eyes betrayed me. They searched the house, the corners, the rooms. They searched for him. And when I finally saw him, sitting casually at the dining table, scrolling through his phone as though the world bored him, something in me shifted again. A rush, a tightening in my chest, the same unnameable thing that had unsettled me before. He looked up. Just once. Briefly. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just looked, directly, steadily. Then returned to his screen. That should have been the end of it. A nothing moment. But I felt the echo of it long after. All evening, I was aware of him. The way he stretched when he stood. The way his voice sounded in the background of conversations, low and unhurried. The way he seemed utterly unconcerned with my presence. And yet, when I allowed myself to glance, He was always at an angle where he could see me too. Dinner blurred by. My friend chattered, laughed, poured wine. I laughed too, but it felt automatic, like an actor reciting lines. Inside, I was somewhere else entirely. When I stood to leave that night, he didn't follow me to the door. He didn't offer words like before. But as I passed him, his hand brushed mine. A simple accident, perhaps. A reach for the same plate, the same glass. But the contact lingered a heartbeat too long. Enough for my body to betray me again. Enough for my mind to spiral into questions I didn't want to ask. In the car, my hands trembled just like before. But this time, I didn't tell myself it was nothing. This time, I knew. Something had already begun.